Hello, Econ students. This is Mr. Stark. Today we're going to talk about supply. We've already talked about demand. Demand is the willingness and ability to buy something. You're thinking as a consumer. With supply, you're now thinking as a producer, as a seller. Now, as a consumer with demand, we love high prices. We love sales. If you're thinking as a seller or a producer, it's actually the opposite. You like high prices, so keep that in mind. But supply is the willingness and ability to offer goods and services for sale. Simple definition. The law of supply states that if price goes down, you're going to supply less. Remember, the best way to make money if you're a seller or supplier is to sell as much as you can at the higher price. So if prices go down, you're not going to make as much money, so you're not going to produce as much. On the other hand, if prices go up, you like that. That's a way to make more money, so you start producing more. This is a direct relationship. Supply is a direct relationship, whereas demand was an inverse relationship. Remember, with supply, you're thinking as a seller. Price goes up, you're going to produce more. Price goes down, you're going to produce less. So, challenge question. According to the law of supply, if Peter produced tennis shoes, which were originally sold at $30 a pair, and Target reduced the price to $15, what would Peter do? Well, if prices went down, according to the law of supply, that means he is going to produce less of them because he makes less money. Therefore, the correct answer is B. He decreases the quantity of shoes he supplies. So, what are things that affect supply? So, just like demand, and this is good news because supply is very similar to demand here, a simple change in price, and by the way, this is a supply curve, whereas a demand curve goes to the dirt, demand goes to the dirt, supply goes to the sky. Left to right, supply goes to the sky. That's going to be important when we put the two lines together here shortly. But this is a supply curve, and a simple change in price is a change in quantity supplied, not a change in supply. That's going to come up in a minute. A change in quantity supplied is caused by price, always by price. And just like demand, price goes up, an arrow goes up. Price goes down, an arrow goes down. One line with an arrow going up if price goes up, and an arrow going down if price goes down. Again, that is a change in quantity supplied. And hopefully if you watch the video from Mr. Clifford, you've already familiar with the difference between these two. If the price goes down, it's going to show an arrow going down. So if you see a graph like this with an arrow going up or down, you always think this is a change in quantity, and price is what causes it. Okay, so this just shows you price went up. So you have one line with an arrow going up. Now we come to change in supply. This is not caused by price. These are caused by outside factors. There were 6 with demand. There are 6 factors with supply, and you're not going to have to memorize them or anything, but I want you to be familiar with them so you can identify what caused the change in supply. Now, just like demand, left is less, right is more. So a new line to the left means less supply. A new line to the right means more supply. So that's the same for demand or supply. A new line to the left means more. A new line to the right means less. So what we're talking about here with change in supply, things that either make it more expensive to make your product or things that make it cheaper for you to make your product. If you're a producer, you're a seller, if it's cheaper to make your product, you can make more of it. If it's more expensive to make your product, you make less of it. Okay, so we are going to look at these here in just a moment, but quick challenge question. Which of the following graphs shows a change in supply that was caused by something other than price? Well, graph A, you should think, okay, it's a price change because we have one line with an arrow going up, which means price went up. This one is a change in supply by one of the 6 factors we're going to look at in a minute. And you should be able to tell right away, in this graph, this shows supply decreasing. Left is less. So here are the factors that cause a change in supply, make it more expensive or less expensive to make your product. So first one's called input costs. I like to call these ingredients. So if an ingredient in what you make goes up in price, it's going to be more expensive for you to make it. For example, if you make pumpkin pie and the price for pumpkins goes up, well, it's going to be more expensive for you to make your pumpkin pie, so you're going to make less. On the other hand, if you make, I don't know, you make Snicker bars and peanuts go down in price, well, that's good for you. It's cheaper for you to make your Snicker bars because they have peanuts in it, so you can make more of them. Second one is labor productivity. This is simply how good your workers are. In short, usually better trained, happier workers are better workers. They make more product. Whereas workers that are unhappy or not as well trained, they make less products. So again, this talks about how productive your workers are. Next one's technology related to it. This is basically how good your technology is. In general, the better your technology, the better or the more you can produce. For an example, before the assembly line, it took a long time to make cars. But then with the assembly line, where you have one person working on one thing, and then now we actually have machines on the assembly line that do a lot of that work for us, quicker, faster, more accurate, you can produce a lot more cars. The next one's the government action. The government can make it harder or easier for a company to make their product. For example, if they want to make it hard, if they don't like a product that a company sells, like tobacco or alcohol, they'll put a special tax on it. That's called an excise tax. We'll talk more about those in a future unit. But that's an additional tax that the government puts on it because they don't want as much of it sold. So cigarettes and alcohol and gasoline are more expensive than they would necessarily be because the government has an additional tax on them. On the other hand, if the government likes a product, they want the company to make more of it, they give them a subsidy. A subsidy is simply the government paying a company to make their product, so it's cheaper to make it. For example, windmills or alternative energy. President Obama, one of his favorite industries when he was president was the alternative industry or the alternative energy industry. So the government paid windmill producers, ethanol producers, that's fuel from corn, solar panel producers lots of money to make their product, so they make more of it and it's cheaper for people to buy. That's called a subsidy. And also regulations. The government puts more regulations on making your product, it's harder for you to make it. It's probably going to be more expensive for you to make it. Number 5 is producer expectations. This is similar to consumer expectations, except you're thinking as a producer. So, for example, if you are a producer of, let's say, for example, you make those marshmallow peeps that really no one likes at Easter. Well, I don't like them. Some people do. Well, you know that people that do like them, the closer you get to Easter, the more you're going to sell. So you're going to hold as much of your marshmallow peeps back. You're going to produce less of it before Easter. And as you get closer to Easter, you're going to make more of them because you know prices will go up. On the other hand, let's say, for example, with gasoline. You produce gasoline and you know that prices are going to go down for gasoline in the future. you will try to produce and sell as much of it now at the higher price as you can. And that's producer expectations. And the last one is the number of producers. This is simply your competition. I like to use this example. Let's say Long's Donuts. We love it. See, on 16th Street, I pass it every day on the way to work. If they were the only donut shop in Indianapolis, they'd produce a lot of donuts. They already do, but they produce a lot more. However, they have hundreds, if not thousands, of competitors in reality, which means they don't produce as much. So basically, if you're the only restaurant on the block, you're going to produce a lot of what you sell. But if you have 10 other restaurants come in, well, you're probably not going to produce as much because customers are going to go to the other restaurants also. And those are the 6 determinants. So let's take a look at some of these situations, see if we can determine the determinant and whether supply is going to increase or decrease. So number 1, a TV factory fires a bunch of workers because they're having financial problems. Well, that would be labor productivity, and because you don't have as many people working there, so you're not going to be as productive with the human workers, and so supply will decrease because you have fewer workers there. Number 2, it's Valentine's Day, or it's the month before Valentine's Day, so January. Candy producers anticipate that they will receive a higher price for their goods next month in February. Closer you get to Valentine's Day, the higher the price is, which leads them to change the amount of candy they supplied the month before Valentine's Day. So it's cheaper the farther it is away from Valentine's Day, which means they're going to produce less of it, but the closer you get to Valentine's Day, you're going to produce more. So in this case, producer expectations and supply is going to decrease the month before Valentine's Day. Number 3, the price of rubber increases, which affects the production at a local bike shop. Well, we know that bikes have tires, and tires are made of rubber. So if rubber goes up in price, well, it's going to be more expensive to make bikes, which means you're going to produce less of them. That's input cost, an ingredient in making bikes. Another one. Miss Fry has a business selling cookies. She does so well that Bilberry, Gilchrist, and Westerfeld start their own cookie making business. Well, she's going to have to share her customers with them, so she's not going to make as much of her product, and that is number of producers. Number 5, in order to discourage the sale of fireworks. It's getting close to the 4th of July, so fireworks are popping up everywhere, no pun intended. So the government creates an excise tax on the product, so it becomes more expensive to make fireworks. The intention of that is to make it more expensive to make it, so they make less of it. So that's government action, and the supply decreases. And number 6, a factory gets a new machine that boxes soap more quickly. Well, that's technology, and the better the technology, the more you produce. So supply increases. Okay, so let's do some practice questions here. So we have 4 choices, 4 graphs. You're going to tell me which graph the situation, or which the situation, which graph reflects it. So if you look here, you should recognize that graph A and B have one line with an arrow going up and down. You should be thinking, okay, those deal with only price changes, choices A and B. Choice A is price going down as the arrow goes going down. Price B is the arrow going up as price goes up. Graph C and D deal with one of those 6 factors we just talked about. And left is less, right is more. So C is less supply, D is more supply. So let's look at the question. Which curve demonstrates the change in supply if you produce t-shirts and your machine got new, more efficient sewing machines? Well, it doesn't mention price changing in there. So you know it can't be A or B. Those deal with price changes, and price is not mentioned there. So it has to be C or D. Well, what's happening here? They got a better machine. Better machines produce more t-shirts, which means an increased supply. So left is less, right is more. Correct answer would be D. Next question. Which curve demonstrates what would happen to supply if you produce t-shirts and Target decided to put your shirts on sale? So in other words, Target decreases the price. Well, we're dealing with a price change, so it's got to be choice A or B this time. Well, what's happening to the price? It's on sale, The price is going down. That would be graph A. Next question. Which curve demonstrates the change in supply if you produce t-shirts and the price of cotton increased? Now this is a bit of a curveball because it does mention price changing, but we want to know what's happening to t-shirts. So we ask, is the price of t-shirts changing? And if you read closely, the answer is no. The price of cotton is going up, which is an ingredient in most t-shirts. So it's not graph A or B because the price of t-shirts is not changing. Well, think, how is cotton and t-shirts related? Well, cotton is an input cost. It's an ingredient. If cotton goes up in price, it's going to be more expensive to make the product. So you're going to make less of it. So C and D, left is less, right is more. Correct answer is C. So now we are ready to cross the lines. Remember, demand goes to the dirt, supply goes to the sky. Okay, we're going to look at what happens when the lines cross, which is called the equilibrium. Okay, so on this one, just remember, label the lines correctly. Supply goes to the sky, it's in red. Demand goes to the dirt. Okay, so the equilibrium, and we're not going to worry about drawing these graphs or anything, but just know the equilibrium is, and you're going to read this in an article too, equilibrium is where supply and demand are equal. It's the point at which the suppliers are willing to sell it and the buyers are willing to buy it. Okay, it's pretty much that simple. It's kind of the ideal price. You're not making too much, you're not making too little. Now, neither side's 100% happy because suppliers want high prices, buyers want low prices. Well, you compromise, you meet in the middle. So for example, look at this graph here. It's already drawn. E1 is the first equilibrium. That's right here where the two lines cross. In this case, it's $20 for this product. Okay? But when supply or demand shifts, that changes the equilibrium price. So for example, on this one, we have a new supply line to the right. Left is less, right is more. So supply is increasing. The equilibrium price went down. This is the price axis. E1 is at $20. E2 is at around $13. And if you think, that makes sense because the more you supply of something, the less valuable it is. There's only one donut left in Indianapolis, that donut would be worth a lot. But in reality, there's probably hundreds of thousands, so they're not worth that much. So that brings us to what's called surpluses and shortages. So we have Qdoba burritos, burritos that are the size of your head. And we have the supply line. Supply goes to the sky, demand goes to the dirt. If you look here where they cross this equilibrium point, the perfect price is $6. That's the perfect price. However, it doesn't always work that way. Let's say Qdoba decided to try something. It's like, well, we're going to raise it to $8. We're going to get a little greedy. Well, we're up here above the equilibrium. Okay, so if you produce at too high a price, well, what's going to happen? Well, not very many people are going to buy them, and you're going to produce too many. So you're going to have what's called a surplus. In order to make things right, you need to move your price back to the equilibrium. The equilibrium is like a magnet. It draws prices to itself. On the other hand, if they drop prices too low to $3 for a big burrito, well, everybody's going to want to buy one. They're not going to produce a lot because of the low price, so there's going to be a shortage of them. Well, in order to make things right again, they have to increase the price back to $6. However, that's if the market is left alone. A lot of times the government gets involved in the prices because either the equilibrium price is too high or the equilibrium price is too low. And I'm going to have you guys read these on your own, but just know that minimum wage, which is $7.25, usually a minimum wage is usually set above the equilibrium. And if you're above the equilibrium, if you remember, that leads to a surplus. More people are going to want to work at the higher wage, fewer jobs available. On the other hand, price ceilings, that is the maximum price you can put on something. And for example, apartment rent prices. In some cities, landlords can only charge so much a month for apartments. You know, maybe for example, maybe the equilibrium price is $900 a month for a 1-bedroom, 1-bath. Well, that's too expensive for most people, or for a lot of middle to lower income earners. And so they put the max price at like $700. That's below equilibrium. Well, that's going to cause a shortage. You're going to have a lot of people wanting to get the lower prices coming in to rent apartments, but fewer landlords wanting to offer them for that price because they don't make as much money. Technically leads to a shortage. Now, these issues are much more complex than just looking at a graph. Minimum wage is a very complex issue. Raising it's a complex issue. There's lots of arguments in favor of a modest minimum wage increase, but there's some good arguments against raising it too high as well.